I'd like to welcome Jane Curtis, CEO and founder at the Charity Event Specialist, to run through the secrets of event recruitment, retention, and converting your attendees into long-term donors. Welcome, Jane.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Chris.
No worries, over to you.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, I'm going to start screen sharing then. Just bear with me while I get that up. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all doing well today. I would say nice to see you, but I can't actually see you, but I can see you're there, so welcome. It's always nice to know who's here, so if you want to pop your name in the chat box, that would be great. I'm Jane. You might know me from training previously. You might have come to one of my training sessions. I also have a big fundraising charity event specialist Facebook group, which I moderate, called the Charity Event Specialists. And I also manage and run a membership for event fundraisers called The Collective. And I do mentoring and various other things, but all within the event fundraising sphere. So I've worked in event fundraising for 21 years now, believe it or not. So yes, so I'm going to be talking to you today about the 3 R's of event fundraising. So 3 ways to raise more money from your events. You can get more people in, attract more people in the top of your funnel, if you like. You can cross-sell activity to your event participants, get them to do multiple activities. You can also cross-sell your events to people, other supporters in your charity. And the 3rd way is you can increase entry fees, set higher sponsorship targets, so increase the funds raised from who you have signed up. And these really are the fundamentals, I guess, to like good event fundraising. I learned these really early on in my career, possibly, I don't know, 18 years ago. So the first thing I'm going to start talking to you about is getting more people signed up. So the kind of recruitment of these 3 R's. What is it costing you to not get the sign-ups that you might need or want or require? Because your event might not raise the money it needs. It could look like a bit of a failure, putting in air quotes. Perhaps then, you know, you're going to start kind of thinking there's something wrong with the event. It could make it difficult for you to champion new ideas. You start losing confidence. It's very stressful if you don't get the numbers that you want signed up for your events. Perhaps other people, more senior people, might start thinking, well, hang on a minute, do they know what they're doing? So yeah, it can cause a lot of kind of unnecessary stress if you're not getting the numbers that you need. So, and then the next stage, once you get them through the door, like what happens next? Do you let them do the event, never to hear from them ever again? Or do you have kind of strategies in place to like re-engage those supporters time and time again? Are you maximizing all of those avenues open to you and to them? And are you maximizing all the income raised? Like, could each of those supporters be worth more for your charity? So we're going to explore each of these a little bit further. I just want to caveat before I sort of dig in to say that each of these areas is kind of worthy of a 90-minute workshop. In fact, I have run a 90-minute workshop just on the first one of these three ways. So this is going to be top level stuff. So get your listening ears switched on as I run through these for you this morning. And I will be around for questions at the end as well. Okay, so first recruitment. Start with who you have and what you know. So this is kind of I guess if you've never done events before, there might be people on this call who are really just in their infant kind of starting out, really thinking about who it is who is most interested in supporting you, people who kind of circulate around you and your charity. They might have done previous events for you. They might be very closely, personally linked to your charity and the cause. They might be your warm networks. Don't forget about those people too, like friends, colleagues. They're people who consume your content. They come to your events year after year. They share your posts. They get their friends to sign up. You know, those people who are just super, super warm to you, your closest kind of network, so your inner orbit. And these are your best, like the best place to start if you're starting from scratch, okay? They care that you do well. And if your event idea, whatever your event is that you might be starting to plan, is of no interest to anyone in that inner orbit, you might want to sort of think again, because you have to work harder, spend more money on casting that net wider to convert those people in like the further out orbits, the outer orbits. So the outer orbit, they're people who are interested in what you do as an organization. Perhaps they haven't taken that leap yet. Perhaps they've sponsored someone doing an event for you, so they're aware of what you do. They might have used your services in some way, but they've never actually done fundraising for you. So they're your next kind of great audience to sort of look at. They might be following you on social media. They might be on your database in some capacity. They could be friends and family of service users, of beneficiaries, your SMT, trustees, corporate supporters, major donors. These are a great audience. But just to sort of say, don't forget about that kind of inner orbit. And to think about kind of how those people in your outer orbit are going to take that leap. Give them something that they want. What is it that's going to push them from that outer orbit into the inner orbit, to make them real kind of warm supporters for you and for your events. So that's the first little bit to think about. Now, who is your ideal participant? Who is your ideal supporter? What if you're entirely starting from scratch with this? You might have exhausted your current networks, or you don't have that kind of inner orbit or outer orbit of networks yet set up yet. So this stage is all about working out who your ideal participant is. Who is your ideal participant? It's a bit hard to see on this screen, but this is taken from a worksheet that I did. It's basically just a piece of paper cut into one side. Who is your ideal? It says customer, supporter, participant, guest. On the other side, who is not your ideal supporter. And it's worth just trying this as a little exercise and just sort of jotting down who you think your ideal person is and who perhaps it isn't. Now, the isn't bit might feel a bit weird, because you might be thinking, well, actually, anyone who signs up to our events is ideal. That would definitely be me, what I used to how I used to think, because they've signed up, like, great, it's another bum on the seat. I totally get it. Especially if one of your targets, which it may well be, it includes sign-ups. That is one of the things that you're being kind of judged on, if you like, is getting an X number of sign-ups for your event. But here's the reason there are many non-ideal people out there. They can take up a hell of a lot of your time. They can raise little money. They cost your charity money because of the time, the energy, the materials, and also that used place, that lost place that someone who is more ideal could have taken. So being able to identify that and create some boundaries is really important. It also helps you kind of micro target more of the ideal people once you've kind of defined who this is. This is going to be different for different events. It's going to be different for different organizations as well. But getting kind of clear on kind of who your ideal participant or guest is a really, really great step to do. So you might be scratching your head thinking, I have no idea, Jane, how on earth do I even begin? Well, I mean, the obvious things to begin with would be they're probably going to have some kind of they'll be affected by what you do in some way, or they've got a friend or family member who have they might be at a certain age or stage of life. They might be in a certain location. If you're a very, very local charity, it's likely that they'll be somewhere within that area, or they might have friends there who live there. You may not be it as the fundraiser. This is really, really key. Your supporters are not this homogenous bunch of people. So you need to be clear on this. You need to sort of almost step out of it for a minute and just really get clear on who these people are. And you cannot please all the people all the time, nor should you try, because you'll end up with some really sort of diluted event that is confusing to your supporter. Be really clear on what you're selling and what the benefits are and what problem it's addressing, because the more time you spend on your unideal customer, the more you're kind of wasting time, which is the most precious thing we have, really. Creating demand and desire. Okay, so things to remember. Change is inevitable. So we've got to get comfortable with testing. There is not one way to do things. The last year and a half has proved that if you don't get results, try something else, try something different. What might have been desirable last year may not be this year, probably change again next year too. So we need to really sort of remember, like, our experiences, our beliefs are not necessarily the same as our audiences. So how can you work out what people desire and what your audience is sort of desiring? You can have a look at Google Keyword Planner, see what people are already searching for. Remember that we have a weird kind of internal lingo in the charity sector that might not be what your audience is kind of searching for. So they may not ever talk about challenge events, or certainly probably never talk about special events. So really sort of think about what it is that they are looking for, and be quite critical about how you're talking about your event and how you're selling it and what copy you're using. What's going to stop your audience in their tracks? Use those words in your promotion. Your website, where are your events listed? Are they hidden under pages and pages of content? Ours used to be, when I worked in-house, it used to be a common argument. I'd be like, I want the events up on the homepage, but yeah, we'd always have a bit of a wrangle about that. But would a non-charity person know where to go to find them? Would they understand what you're asking of them? Ask some non-charity events people to look for you, and the less clicks, the better. One of my biggest successes in my career came from somebody who came to our website to find out more about the support that we offer, and our event was right on the homepage, and he just signed up there and then and went on to raise over £50,000 himself. I doubt he would have done that if it hadn't have been on the homepage. Anyway, have a think also about kind of where your participants might be hanging out, where your event supporters are hanging out naturally. Is it Facebook? Is it Twitter? Is it Instagram? Is it TikTok? Get really clear on like what social media works best for which audience and for your audience. And within that, you can really sort of look at how to kind of generate more of that engagement and more of that community feeling. You could, if you've never done an event before, and this is the first time, and you're like, oh, never done this type of an event before, consider putting on a kind of pilot or a trial, just so you can start to gather some of that kind of some of those pictures and some of that, some of those marketing materials. We used to go to the park and all put our vests on and just do a little run or do a cycle. So we had some photos we could use. Social media can be really tricky, and obviously it's been all over the press recently. You can become very over-reliant on it, so be aware that it can be that huge kind of time suck. However, I think personally it would be daft to not utilize social media, because that is where your people are most likely hanging out. Not definitely, but most likely they will be somewhere. Email, do not forget about email. How are you going to grasp your audience's attention, to grow that sort of database, give them something they want through ticket promos, early bird, group tickets, bundles, VIP access, all that great stuff, incentives for signing up. And don't forget about third-party ticket sites either. Things like Eventbrite, people are starting to use more and more as like search engines as well. So they'll go on there to sort of see what's on in their local area. Messaging. This, again, is an exercise that I've taken off one of my worksheets, but you can just jot this down if you want to try it out yourself. Why does someone want your event? What problem are you addressing with your event? I'm not sure I ever asked myself this question, but I think sometimes we rely too much on it being for a good cause, you know, for the raising money for our cause. I don't think it's enough to just sort of say that, because there's 480,000 non-profits in the UK. So you need to go that little bit further. Like, how are you going to get your messaging to really stick? It could be the impact that money that they're raising from that event is going to make, and get really specific on that. That's really tricky with events fundraising, because most often it's unrestricted income, not restricted. However, you can get creative with that, okay? Get creative with what that money could be paying for. You need to also be thinking about like emotive stories that propels people to support, but to support via your event. Is it that your event is like a must-do bucket list type activity that will help give them something, give something up, or lose weight, or get fit for the new year, or make friends, come together with family after a long time apart, access to something that they'd find difficult to get elsewhere? This is going to help you address that market saturation if you can talk about your event and the benefits of it on several levels. Every person on this session could be organising the same event. So what's going to make me sign up for yours over theirs? What's motivating me, or, you know, my mum or my brother, my husband, you know, like best friends. Like, we're all going to have different motivations and we'll all be triggered by different motivators. So what is the perceived problem that your event solves? Why does someone want your event over and above the fact that it's for your charity? And for bonus points, you can get really clear on like how they're going to feel after the event. So that's like painting that picture. You get super clear on that. How do they feel after they finished? You can start to talk about that in some of your messaging as well. Are there any consequences to not signing up? Is there a reason why this is their golden opportunity? Like, FOMO is real, right? You know, can you create that urgency, even if you know there isn't and there would be another opportunity? How can you create some of that kind of urgency? Incentives, bonuses, etc. Objectives. Now, this is, again, might feel a bit weird and a bit counterintuitive, because you're thinking, why would I address objections if they haven't made them already? However, you know, why would you be giving someone a reason not to do something? But I promise you that these thoughts will be happening, will be occurring in your audience, whether you address them or not. So it's probably worth addressing them in your copy. Otherwise, you might be saying goodbye to whole loads of people who would have signed up had it been for XYZ, but you'll never know. And then they're lost opportunities. So share some reasons why people wouldn't sign up, what the things that you hear yourselves. It might be the date's not convenient. They've got something better going on. They don't want to fundraise. They don't want to run, cycle, swim. What other objections have you heard? You can pop them in the chat if you want. And you can have a go at doing this exercise as well. So objections on one side, how to address them, dismantle them on the other. You know, this sounds great, but ... Are they worried about coronavirus restrictions? Are they worried that they're not fit enough? You know, flush out those objections, and then you can tackle them in your copy. And yeah, if they persist in your audience's sort of brains, they're not going to take action. So you need to be able to counter them. Imagine like they're the walls that prevent people from signing up to your event. And you can do that in your FAQs, on your sign up page, in your initial copy to keep people interested. You can address them in your social media, in your groups. So yeah, and use like case studies of people who have proved that wrong, you know. So like you know, you might be thinking that you're not fit enough to do this, but however, that's exactly what Rob felt. But you know, and he'd never run, he hadn't run further than just to the end of the road before he did this. But you know, with all our help and our support and our very excellent training plans, over the next sort of 12 weeks, he was able to get fit enough to do this event. So, you know, proving where that has happened, if that makes sense. So that's some objections. Okay, conscious of time, I'm going to run on to the retention strategies. So this is the second R. How can you keep hold of your supporters once they're in the door? So research has stated it's 15 times harder to get a new cold contact to sign up to something than a warm one. So not only are you making your life a heap harder, you're potentially leaving a lot of untapped income on the table by not retaining your supporters. And really, it's a no-brainer. Like, the initial hard work is done. You've got them through the door. They've signed up to something, or they've done something else within your organisation, within your charity already. Remember, they may not have initially come in through an event, but they may have. But they like you. They want to support you. Hopefully, they've had a great experience, you know. So over-deliver, give them what you promise, give them great customer support, give them a surprise or two along the way, and create these like super fans. I'm going to run through 3 retention strategies that you can adopt. I've got so many of these strategies, but for the interest of time, I've had to cut it down, keep it very quick. But I'm doing another training workshop next month all about retention. So if you want to come to that, you can. Shameless plug. Number 1, communicate your events calendar. Okay, this is pretty essential, I think, is to create a calendar. If you don't already have one, communicate your calendar with your supporters. The best practice is to create activity that builds upon previous activity, previous months, creates that kind of demand, you know. So you can do that through a series of events, series of runs, increases in distances, things like that, with challenge events, warm-up events for longer runs. But you can do it in a number of ways. Your supporters are not all the same. So there's going to be runners who want to come to your Christmas concert, trusts and foundations who want to come to your cultivation events, corporates who want to do your challenges, etc. We have to get out of this kind of events, corporate, major donor kind of way of thinking and acting. I saw that Wayne Murray had said something really nice yesterday about don't think about them as silos, think about them as bubbles, because bubbles are easier to pop, which I think is really nice. The idea of a silo is very kind of robust and rigid, but actually think of them as bubbles. Supporters are supporters, so you can tease your supporters about what's coming up as well. This gives them a reason to stay engaged and connected. There may be a number of reasons why you don't already do this. It might be that your calendar is not sewn up yet. There's still uncertainty about what's happening. Quite understand there might be several parties involved. It doesn't have to be completely written in stone, you know. Even just having something kind of fairly loose would be useful and helpful. You can sort of do like what's coming up next month or what's coming up in the summer. So yeah, and everyone will benefit from knowing this, like everyone right across the organization. Your audience don't give two hoots if they're flagged as a corporate or a major donor or an event participant. They support your charity and they want to know what's going on. I've been at events for challenge eventers, thank you events, where there's been no like special events promoted, you know, and someone has come up and sort of said, oh, what about your Christmas concert? And there was no information about it anyway, because there were different teams running them, organizing them. But it just makes no sense. It doesn't look joined up. You're leaving money on the table. So create a calendar if you can that includes all of the activity that's taking place across the charity, whether it's your team's remit or not. The second thing is create a clear stewardship path from the moment you sign someone up, even before that. A clear stewardship path identified and mapped out for them. It's like a supporter journey or whatever you want to call it, a success path. It's the journey your participant goes on to get them from where they are now to where they want to be. So that's your kind of promise that that you're selling them when they sign up to your events. There are a number of questions that you can ask in order to get there, like what is the ultimate promise outcome you promise them? What do they need to learn or understand or have done, e.g. raised X amount of money to have this outcome? What actions do they need to take each week, each month? How long will this take? And then you can begin to map out phases or steps that your supporter needs to act so they have very clear expectations as a supporter. I've got a nice downloadable free PDF with these questions on, so you can get in contact with me. I'll show you how in a minute, and I can send that to you. Create a community, Facebook or other forum. Facebook, you know, it's been in the press a lot recently. You might not be wanting to go down that route, absolutely understand. Facebook is great because lots of people are already on it. It's quite easy, but some kind of forum or community is a great idea for your event participants, for your supporters. You know, there's a reason why Facebook events did so well during the pandemic. It's easy to engage with people on there to build that community. I've got Facebook groups for my members, and you know, best practices for creating a really highly engaged Facebook group. Make the group setting private, then you can welcome people in, make them feel really special, do a little orientation video explaining what's going on. You can invite participants to join your group immediately after signing up for your event. Invite new participants to introduce themselves. You can create like a weekly schedule of activities and topics. You can connect people as well, which is a really important one. You can connect people up, so you don't have to be the know-it-all, but you can connect other kind of runners or other members up, and then they become that kind of, that they'll keep coming back for more. And don't forget about the dormant periods between events as well, when not much is going on or you're not actively selling an event. This is a really excellent place to then get to know your supporters, get to know them, get to know what they need, and start looking to other supporters, connect them together, as I said. start building those super fans. So that's the, creating some kind of forum, some kind of place for them. So the third R is raising more funds. I couldn't find a PDF thing, slide with pounds, so you've got dollars. The simplest way to make more money from your events is to increase the entry fee, registration fee, ticket price, set higher sponsorship targets. Now, I understand there's hesitancy to do this, and I wouldn't suggest, there might be hesitancy, I shouldn't say there is, there might be. I wouldn't suggest you go way above what other charities are doing, but I do often see charity events almost kind of apologising for charging a registration or setting an income target. And it annoys me because you're providing a fantastic service and there is a necessary outlay, including a considerable amount of your time. So if you undervalue your event, you're possibly giving off a perception that, might be received that it's not going to be very good, or you don't expect anyone to come and you have to position the entry so low. But as you've already identified in step number 1, attracting lots of people who just want to come because it's really cheap are not necessarily your ideal participants, and it's not the ideal way to future-proof your event either. So yes, think about the potential of your event and where you want it to go, and whether you could be setting slightly higher registration fees for it. How long has it been since you've done that? Like, are you still charging the same year after year after year? Because your costs will have risen, supplies are harder to come by, so your registration fee income should rise too. Otherwise, your events are raising less each year. Do you offer incentives to reach a certain level? Because incentives really work. There have been numerous case studies of this over the pandemic, people offering hoodies for walkers or runners raising £500 or more. It works. The hoodie might cost your charity £7 to £10. But if you're increasing the sponsorship target by £100 to £200 or more, that's a good ROI. Gamification badges, people love that sort of stuff. If you're able to sort of say, yay, well done, you got to 100, here's your £100 badge, whatever. What about upsells? What do I mean by upselling? Offering something additional alongside your event for an extra donation or entry fee or ticket price. Obviously, you're going to ensure that any additional income is covered by the cost of the extra reward, but many people will pay for convenience, okay, and for time-saving opportunities. Remember, you may not be the ideal person for your event, so you might not be doing it, and therefore you're thinking that no one else will. That's not the case. Virtual events, sending wine out to people for extra money, as well as their wine tasting notes or hampers, or offering, actual pack of kind of goods so they can make that dinner at home or whatever. Those kind of things work really well during the various lockdowns. So always look for opportunities to move your event participants on something else as well. The event is not the end of it, whether that be onto an individual giving program or as a corporate prospect or onto your next event. Create that whole lifetime kind of cycle. And this is really kind of the one thing I want you to take away with you today, is it is a cycle. Your events, your fundraising is not a linear process. It's easy to think that because events are very much like, beginning, middle and end, but like the end is not the end. The end should be the beginning for something else. One impacts the other, which impacts the other, which impacts the other. They're all interlinked. So getting your head around all of these areas is going to massively improve the results from your events fundraising. So yes, and I just want to finish up by saying the sector needs you. This is my call to you. It doesn't matter if you're a new fundraiser, event fundraiser, or more experienced, whether you work in a big charity, small charity. It's the same principles. It's about taking baby steps and taking action. I know this time is hard. It's been super, super difficult, super challenging. But those little 1% tweaks that you make to your program over time result in huge, huge change. And the sector needs you. We need events to change the world, to change our organisations. And I want you to be on your A game. So here are some ways that you can get hold of me. If you hold your phone over that QR code, it comes up with my LinkedIn URL. Is that what it's called? So you can just go there and link in with me. I also run a membership community called The Collective for event fundraisers, which you are very welcome to come and join. I coach and mentor fundraisers. I've started a podcast. It's called The Event Fundraisers Show. You can find it on Spotify and Apple iTunes. And I've got a large Facebook group you can come and join as well, called The Charity Event Specialists. Or you can email me. So there's plenty of ways to get hold of me. I think I've done it. 11:15. That was my time. Right, I'm going to come back in. Stop caring.
You have indeed. You've done it. Yeah, well done. And a fabulous way to end a fabulous session. Thanks very much for that, Jane. That was great. On a separate note, we should talk about podcasts sometime, but that's not for today. But yes, some cracking questions coming in as well. I have been seeing some people put them in the chat. So make sure you get your questions in the right place. So move them over to the Q&A. It's in the same conversations tab. It's just one over to the right there. So make sure you click that and we'll get it answered for you. So first one from Kathy. A lot of our supporters, especially out of orbit, are not on social media. Any tips on warming them up without having to print off hundreds of newsletters to post out?
So they're not on social media, was that?
Not on social media, yes.
Yeah. I mean, email in a lot of ways is better than social media because you own that. Like you don't own it, but you know what I mean. Like the downsides of social media is that you don't own it. And if we have a case like we did last week when Facebook just fell over, if people are very over reliant on those ways of communicating with supporters, then that is when you start. So email is great. So any way that you can start building up that, I'm assuming that there are ways that are they on email? Maybe they're not on email either.
It's not said, yeah.
Yeah, but offering something free so that you can start building that list a little bit more, perhaps, is a really good way to build that kind of community. I agree with you about like printing off loads of things, but it's not to say there isn't still a kind of place for that. Actually, a lot of charities found that they were getting huge responses from door drops that they were doing during lockdown because a lot of people were at home, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes you forget about just good old-fashioned snail mail, and actually it's quite fun to get something through the post. But yes, I would say don't overlook email. I'm pretty sure most people are on email now.
Yeah, I think to add to that a little bit, I'll find out where they are. If they're not on social, where are they? And aim at them there. Meet them where they are. It makes it 10 times easier, whether it is email or if they're not digital savvy, where are they? Can you make potential partners? There's that old saying, there's no better form of marketing than word of mouth marketing and having people tell your story on your behalf. Can you get other people to do that for you who can reach these people potentially as well? But yeah, lots of different ways to get around that sort of thing. Next question from another Kathy, different spelling. Do you have any suggestions of any other platforms, forums to create a community with no budget so we can create the engaged community that you were referring to?
So not Facebook. Yeah, I mean, there are other things like, I know some people use like Slack. Now, I've never used Slack in this way, and I don't know how you would use it. You might know better, Chris, but in terms of but there are other places that you can get you can even have forums embedded into your own website, can't you? And then you would have a bit more ownership over it. I suppose the benefits of something like Facebook, that tends to, well, not necessarily, but a lot of people are on there anyway, so it's just super easy to manage it in that place. But yes, I know that some organisations have their own that they've just sort of popped in their website. Do you know any other, Chris? I'm not very good on this.
A few, and Jonathan and I were actually talking to one last night. I think it's called. Oh, I'm not going to remember it. I'll have to come back to it. But it was the problem with, you can do it on places like WhatsApp, for example. But the problem there is you're not always GDPR compliant because people can see each other's phone numbers and stuff like that. So you've got to be really careful with stuff like that. And Slack as well with sharing personal data. But there is a tech platform out there that I've totally forgotten the name of. And I apologize for that. Which I'm going to find.
Discord as well. Agni has just said Discord is a good one.
Discord, yeah. There was a few popped up. That's driving me mad. Sorry about that. I'll come back to everybody after. I can't remember what it's called. But yeah, there's a really good one out there that is totally GDPR compliant, and I will dig up the name for everybody. But yeah, you mentioned, if you've got a simple WordPress site, you can just set up a forum widget, and build it into your website. And I'm sure Jane, as a forum sort of owner and moderator, it's incredibly difficult to keep on top of. So you've really got to keep it updated and give it the love and care that it needs as well to keep it bustling. But yeah, there are little bits of tech out there that can help, and we'll put that out with the slides after this. So keep an eye on that when they come back. Sorry about that. Next question from Marie. Can you share an example of an ideal/non-ideal customer exercise, please? I would like to understand what level of detail does apply there.
Yeah, so that's a great question. Yeah, and I think you can kind of do this as top level or, you know, as detailed as you would wish, and you could either do it yourself as a solo exercise, but I would ideally suggest that you involve lots of people in it, because it's going to be different depending on who you talk to, so you can pull together all of that experience. But literally just separating a piece of paper down the middle and putting that as sort of two areas first. You could have on the one side, you know, they're probably going to be people who know about your charity already, but are they of a certain age? Like, you could look at your previous events and sort of see if there was a particular sort of demographic of people who did really well with their fundraising. You know, are they going to be very sporty, or maybe they're just people who are just starting out? Maybe they're parents. You know, what are their networks like? What media are they consuming? Are they on social media? What TV programs do they watch? We did this really creative exercise when I worked in-house, where we just brought in a load of old magazines, and we literally cut out people that we thought looked like our sort of ideal supporters. And obviously it's completely generalizing, but, you know, it really helped to get really clear on that kind of avatar. So it was like, you know, this is Sharon, she's got 2 kids at school, she works here, she's this age, she goes to the gym every week, you know, and you can get really clear on it. And then the person who's not ideal, it could be somebody who's just like, oh, they've just come across us here, and they're more event driven than they are cause driven, or you could get really quite specific with it. You can spend a lot of time on this, but yeah, I mean, does that help? I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, I think it's, you know, it was actually mentioned in the, you know, persona building was a big topic in the previous session as well, and something I, as a marketer, absolutely love doing. It's great fun, learning about your audience, making the assumptions, and then testing the theory and iterating. And I think one of the often overlooked things about persona building in general is that, you know, ask people. Generally, your audience in our sense, donors in this sense, will be happy to share a little bit of information for you, especially those, if you can identify off the sort of bat who your top performing customers are, your top giving donors. So you want to create more people like that. What's that persona look like? What do they do? What are their interests? What do they do on the weekend? Where do they get their information from outside of your organization?
They have pets, you know, dogs, walking with dogs, all that kind of stuff.
Everything. The more you know on these people, the better. The nicer the journey you can create, essentially. I always talk about, bore people to death talking about blood.co.uk. Their donation journey, albeit a very different donation, is so good, such a good experience, and it's personalized. You know, not only going and having a bit of crack with the people who work there, getting your coffee and biscuit afterwards, but then the whole coming round, the saying thank you, explaining where your donation's gone and what's happened with it, what's being done. It makes something that's could not be very enjoyable.
Yeah.
So it's I always tout them as a really good example.
Yeah.
Got time for one more question from Kevin. Top tips for getting people to jump from outer orbit to inner orbit.
Oh, well, I mean, there is something to be said about just time. You know, like if they're in their outer orbit for long enough, at some point you would hope that they would start to kind of merge into that inner orbit. But really, it's about getting them to take that leap, and what is going to get them to take that leap. So you may have to push them a little bit. You might have to be a bit more direct with your asks, you know, and again, identifying who those people are and who the people in the inner orbit are, and seeing where you can kind of potentially sort of match them up, or where there might be some overlap, would be really helpful. Just keep going out with your just think about how you're going to get them to make that kind of leap, whether that, and it might not be an event, and that's okay, you know. Like as we said, supporters are supporters. They don't self-identify with being an event participant, or so yeah, just think perhaps a little bit holistically about where they could be offering support. You could get them in as a volunteer as well, like as a marshal, if they don't really want to do the event yet themselves, or think of some other ways that you could sort of get them closer to what you're doing.
Brilliant. Well, we have run out of time, but thank you very, very much for an amazing session.